So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for joining today's webinar session here. So we're just going to get started. So today's webinar session is Egress planning using Occupant Flow Analyzer from the CTC tools. Just a little quick introduction. My name is Patrick Siemek from SolidCAD. I am a technical consultant on the AEC team. And today I will be showing you a couple tools that you can use for your everyday Revit projects within utilizing CTC and one of their tools. So today's learning objectives is how can we use a tool from CTC and access the Occupant Flow Analyzer tool, and again, what it does. We're going to also overlook the Occupant Flow Analyzer interface. Going to look through some of the occupant path and load settings that we can use during the tool as we kind of work through it, and then how we could also use custom parameters for analyzing. So what the tool does is it allows you to kind of calculate and make analytical views and elements to help you process kind of say egress pathing within your projects. So with that said, let's already just jump in straight into a demo and just have a live workflow. So from here, as I kind of just have my Revit project open, inside of Revit, in the newer versions of Revit, there is a tool underneath the Analyze tab that you do have path of travel or kind of route analysis that you can use within your projects. So it is a great tool, but with the tool that we're going to be looking at is actually a tool developed that even has further settings and options that we could utilize to help us further analyze and calculate any kind of path of travel or egress pathing within our projects. So the tool that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be from CTC software, and the tool is going to be found within the CTC BIM project suite. So there are different types of suites within the CTC software tools. Today we're going to be looking at the Occupant Flow Analyzer. This one is going to be found kind of within the green bar as we see over here underneath the CTC BIM project suite. So we do have other great tools as we see here in the darker green, and there are also some great free tools that you're able to utilize within this pack. So within the suite, let's already just jump into the tool itself. So from the BIM project suite, going to select my Occupant Flow Analyzer tool. Once we open up the tool, we have a few different settings and options that we kind of can work with. The first one I'm going to do is look at the different tabs that I have at the top and look at the occupant load calculations. So as I click the occupant load calculations, how and which way do I want to kind of utilize the data within my Revit projects, and then have the tool actually analyze or calculate any of my settings or options that I have preset. So looking at the very first option, occupancy load factors. So as we work inside of Revit, if I kind of look in the background over here, we have different rooms already created. And if I zoom into here, we can see, let it be a tech support area. Within one of these rooms that I have, if I select the actual room itself, as I select it, in my properties of this room, I do have some additional parameters that input some type of data to that room itself. So if I want some type of load factor being utilized with the Occupant Flow Analyzer, I have a customized area per person, and then in brackets SolidCAD parameter that I want to read from. So as I select the room itself in the Revit model, in my properties, here I can see, as I kind of scroll down a little bit more, here in the dimensions area, I got an area per person value, and then we have it in square footage. So with this specific parameter, that's the values that I want to use as a load factor as I utilize my occupancy flow analyzing tool. So from here, we can select it from a parameter that we have customized within Revit, or even from a spreadsheet that you can bring into your own projects. And then you could also link that data, first the spreadsheet itself, and then to a parameter to kind of map that data to. We're going to be using the parameter that I have from the rooms already. The next kind of option is the occupant load results and redistribution. So how do we want some information to kind of be redistributed before we start processing our Occupant Flow Analyzer? So we have a few different options here. we have the do not redistribute. So what this does, it will calculate totals only and store them within the objects. So it's just going to be kind of the totals within the room itself. We then got to redistribute uniformly. So what this will do, it'll round up at the required group and then divide equally for objects. Here a little bit lower, you can see you could actually create different types of groups, different parameters that you can redistribute the information that's coming from the load factor, then to how you want the load results and redistribution to be done by a specific group. And right now, the one we're going to be kind of working with is just going to be the primary use one with the parameter as level. You can always add additional groups. So just simply by selecting inside of the field, you could always add additional groups as needed. And then the third one, we have redistribute according to the raw occupant load. So this one, it will round up the up at the required group, then proportionally apply values to objects based on their raw load values. So that is actually going to be the option that we're going to be using today. It's going to be this last one that I have in place. Going to be using the primary use level option and some other values that we could see here. So if I just start selecting, maybe if I'll go to another one over here, uncheck some of these rounding options and run a calculation option, we can see values being automatically input to my rooms. With this specific one, redistribute uniformly with my room selected, we can see my occupancy value is now a decimal with like many numbers at the end. So I do want some kind of rounding options as I work with my calculations. So just going to switch back to my other option that I have here. You can round up based off of the group or the parameter that you have selected. Or at the very bottom, we also have just round up at the spatial element level, which I'll be doing for this specific purpose. You could always add additional groups as mentioned. And then we have also to specify where we want that load parameter that is being calculated and placed, which inside of my room, once again, I have a custom parameter called occupancy and in brackets SolidCAD. That's where I want that value to be stored. As we could also see, you could do this to rooms, areas, and spaces. Going to select the calculate option. It's going to run that calculation. And now we got more workable numbers as whole values. So we have those options in place. Now the next option. So again, setting up some of the load calculations and running those load calculations to be placed inside of our Revit models. Now, how do we want our path settings to work? So the first option that we're going to have at the very top, yes, you can pick what type of phase that you're going to be working inside of your project. And now we have impassable objects. So from here, we can select categories, family types, and even individual elements that we want our tool to run through. So some of the impassable objects that we could select as we have here already is casework, furniture systems, and walls. Those are not there because we do want to go through them and have the egress pathing properly calculate. So you can always add additional categories as needed. You could do individual family types also, and just single elements. So we do have those options that you could utilize there. We also have a show elements portion. As I move down, once I select where I want or what objects I do not want my routing to kind of pass through, I'm going to go to now the path analysis options. So from here, as I kind of utilize some of these values and inputs, the first one is spatial element parameter to read occupant load. So from the previous tab that we had, the occupant load calculations, which I ran, I did set up a occupancy per each room. So here I'm just specifying that value that I calculated and I want to run the tool using that parameter. As we kind of work through, once again, as mentioned, you do have rooms, areas, and spaces that you could run this tool for. At the bottom, any elements with areas smaller than, we could also specify that. So maybe there's some like closet areas or just small little locations that you do not want to have part of your calculations. You can then specify a specific size. As we work a little bit farther, so once we specify what load factor we want to use, if we want to ignore any areas or rooms in this case for this option, we could specify that. And then at the bottom, target flow load. So with this, we can start specifying now the flow factor as we kind of run the tool. So you can specify a parameter for the flow factor or a specific spacing, say going through the egress door or kind of the exit door that we have. Based off of specific codes that you are working with, you could input that data as we have here. It will use your Revit units that you're using. So again, if you're in metric, it'll use the metric units. If you're in imperial, it will use those imperial units. So I'm just specifying a flow factor of 0.03 feet or inches within my analyzing or calculation. And now the maximum flow. So as we kind of have the calculations running through, where or what kind of flow do we want to have the calculation calculate? So with here, we could do a parameter coming from the door itself that we are going to be using. And in my case, I'm going to have the width parameter being selected as an option. Or you could also specify a value, once again, based off of the units that you have within your project. So once we have those first occupant load calculations and we ran them, then our path settings, how we want the tool to kind of run through the different impassable objects that we have, what values to read from, so the occupancy load that we had, anything that we want to ignore, and then as we go kind of to the egress or exiting portion, what also other values do we want to be calculated as the tool works through. The final option that we're going to have here is now going to be the actual occupant path itself. So at the very top, start regions. So we can then specify a couple different options of how we want the tool to run. So with the tool over here, we could do all spatial elements. So then it'll show kind of a exiting point from every single room to the exit locations that we have. We have another option here, all spatial elements in the current view. So again, just the view that I've opened, we could have those, say, egress path things being created. What's nice about this tool is you can actually do level to level egress pathing. So as you do run the tool, you could do it from multiple levels and it will do those full calculations from going and spanning through multi-stories or multi-levels within your project. In this specific example, just going to be doing one floor. And then as you can see here, you could do it as an individual floor, all spatial elements at a level. If you have multi-levels, you could select those individual levels. You could do it just for the current view, or as mentioned, you could also do it through multiple floors as needed. And then you could also just select specific, say, rooms that you want to run that calculation. As we go to the bottom here, target objects. So again, how do we want to run our exiting or our egress pathing? You could do it to a category, you could do it to a family type, but in my case, I actually want to do it to a specific door. So from here, we do have the ability to select which doors we want the egress pathing to. If I select one of these doors, maybe I'll just kind of do the show element option. Even with the tool being open, we could still look inside of our Revit projects in the background and kind of pan around as needed. With the 3 doors I have selected, we can see one I have on the bottom of my building, on the right side, let it be to the front of the building, and also at the top. You could always add doors, you could always remove doors, you could then rerun the calculation also with new setups. So here we could then specify which doors we also want to select. There are a little bit other options here too. There is a shortest path tool at the top. So as I click into here, like in the typical Revit travel path option, you could just do from a starting point to an ending point, and then it'll run that path as needed. So with all of my settings that I have now set up right now, with this tool, right before I run it, you do have save settings. So if there's something that you consistently kind of are going to be running, let it be for this specific project or other types of projects, you can save specific settings and then modify them as needed moving forward. So let's just run the tool itself. So right at the bottom right, going to have the find path option. With the tool, you will get some warnings at a time depending if the tool will run properly based off the calculations and the settings that you have selected. So you will see a few warnings. If there are any warnings, in my case, I do have a few of them. And again, can read through the warnings, make those changes and fixes, and work through having the tool being set up to work with the warnings or fix the warnings as needed. So I'm just going to run through the tool over here. It's going to do a few different runs here at the bottom, as you can see. Step 2 of 7, getting some information. not all of my rooms are being properly calculated, which we'll see as the tool finishes up. So once the tool has fully run, you will get kind of a report coming through. First, the target doors that we have selected, how many, say, kind of load factors or capacity factors have kind of gone through that door based off of these settings that we have set. So here we could see per this first door, capacity was 100. People or persons kind of going through the door itself. The other one was 105, and the last one was 100. Then you also have a load factor coming through within the calculation itself. And finally, the distance for all of those calculations. So we do have this kind of report coming through. You could save the report, run the tool again, and kind of see what are the best options or best settings based off the tool that you are running. Also, within this report, there are warnings. So if something does not properly calculate, you could always come into the warnings themselves and start looking at these warnings and then fix them as needed to have a true egress pathing option. So with this example here, as you can see, some of the rooms that I have selected, they were not kind of used for the pathing. So in this case, I could kind of write those rooms down, go into my project, figure out what was wrong with them. You also do have some details to those specific rooms. So once we have the tool run and kind of completed with that, I'm going to click OK here, going to close out of the tool. And now I'm going to go look visually on my floor plan, what has been created. So with on my life and safety plan already here, I'm going to zoom in and we should see some lines that have been created for us. As I hover over the lines, we can see the tool will create a generic model family. So if I select this element in my properties, I can see it is for the Occupant Flow Analyzer path number 1. It is a generic model. It is a 3D element, which we'll kind of see in a few seconds. With this specific tool, we could see the different locations that the tool is running its loads from and its calculations. So we do have kind of these node points, as we can see, being calculated through our system. So it's also picking up the amount of, say, persons going through certain locations. What's nice about also this specific fan that has been created, it is interactive. So what I mean by that is I can hover over to one of the nodes. Maybe I'll go to, let's see what we have there, right over here. So we do kind of have a door with a side light, but as you can see, my path is actually not going through the door, it's going through the side light. You can take these nodes and modify them. So with that node selected, I can start adjusting it to have that proper calculation, since it was actually just going through the side light, which is part of the door, and I mentioned it to be impassable, but we can start modifying this as the tool has been run. So with this tool, as you can see, we have the different nodes that are running through and creating that kind of range of the different calculations. So we have a few different paths here. So as I select this other path here at the top, we can see from point A to point B, depending on the rooms that we have selected and are in. We have the different nodes in place, and then we have the final one just here on the right side. Since it is a family, these elements can also be scheduled. So you can take that data directly from these families, have them scheduled, and again, having it in a different format for you to view. They are generic models as mentioned, and they're being placed in the model. With these elements, there are some kind of default settings. So the height of the generic model is 1 foot off the base offset, and then a total height of 7 feet. So it knows of the elements that it can pass through, depending on the settings that you have set. Along with this tool, so again, it is a model. You're going to have to kind of use different filters and viewing options to maybe specify or kind of enhance the viewing options of your egress of path. If I were to go to a 3D view, I'm going to come into my 3D view over here. I already have a specific view template for my Occupancy Flow Analyzer or life and safety plans. So if I come into my view, maybe I'll just rename this to my 3D life and safety. Once I have the view name changed, I'm going to apply a view template, my egress planning. with that view template, I could also change maybe just to that first floor that I was just working with. So within my view template, I already have some filters being used to look for that specific generic model that I have in place. Here we can see there is that 3D element. I kind of emphasized it with a little bit of line thickness. But as I kind of orient it or orbit my view, we can see there is a specific height and elevation to our path that has been created or to the family that we have in place. So it's another way that we can kind of analyze and look at the values that have been created. So just another view type that we could utilize, not only a floor plan, it is a generic model. Use a filter to look for the element itself and then provide some different graphical settings as needed. So we could quickly create the path of travel or egress of pathing for our projects. So in kind of conclusion here, again, utilizing your Occupancy Flow Analyzer to show the path of travel, to show the egress pathing within your projects. It has a little bit more functionality than what the out-of-the-box Revit tool has. Many different settings. You could customize the parameters that you'd like to use. There is a calculating tool within the tool itself also, which makes it nice and easy for you to calculate and analyze your different settings for your life and safety plans. Also, the tool can run through multiple levels. So it's not just a single level base. You could run it through a large building if needed for your calculations. So in conclusion, utilizing the Occupant Flow Analyzer tool from CTC, you can streamline calculating or analyzing egress path using the Occupancy Flow Analyzer. You can generate visual representations of egress pathing, and along with that, just using some filters and visibility and graphic settings to kind of emphasize it a little bit more, as we saw within the 3D view that I had showed towards the end. You could apply specific settings and custom parameters for calculations. So we saw that I did have a few different area per person values being used. We had the occupancy parameter that was being calculated too, and that was used to create my egress of path or path of travel utilizing the Occupant Flow Analyzer. And finally, you could produce Revit elements that can be scheduled. So you could schedule these specific families, which are generic models. And also we saw we can change and modify the family based off its nodes to have a true or a more updated and accurate egress of path. So with the CTC tool, we're talking about the BIM Project Suite and the Occupancy Flow Analyzer. How to obtain the tools? So to obtain the tools, you could go directly to the ctcsoftware.com website, and underneath products, you will see the different suites. And today we were talking about the BIM Project Suite, where you will see the green tools and also the Occupant Flow Analyzer. There is a demo for the tools themselves, and there are also free tools that you could always utilize and download as needed. And that is one location where you could download those tools. So with that said, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to today's webinar on the Occupancy Flow Analyzer, creating egress pathing utilizing that tool. My name is Patrick Siemek, technical consultant with SolidCAD on the AEC team. If you have any other kind of comments or questions, feel free to utilize your microphone or the chat right now. I'm more than happy to answer any of those questions. If you'd like to reach me directly with questions, I have my email here up on the screen right now. And if any information about accessing or obtaining the tools, feel free to reach out to me also. So I'm just going to keep it open here for a few moments for any questions or comments that anyone may have based off of today's webinar, which was the CTC Occupancy Flow Analyzer. Well, once again, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. My name is Patrick Siemek, technical consultant with SolidCAD on the AEC team. Feel free to reach out to me at patrick.siemek@solidcad.ca. Thank you, everyone.